Hi, a little reminder that we are live on Twitch every Friday and Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Greek hour. So don't hesitate to join us for cozy streams. Thank you, and I let you with the video.
I'm gonna read you a little short story. Well, little, it's a big word, but a short story I wrote, which names The Black Archives, Case 00, The Screaming Man. And that's why we got a little bit of drawing Friday. We tried to draw the Screaming Man, and now you will hear about his story. Even though now it's just Stephanie, but that's fine. Okay, I will try to get into the narrative mood. Let's get in. In a small village far from the big cities and surrounded by forests, a strange atmosphere reigned. Something felt off. The air was heavy, and the villagers' eyes constantly scanned the surroundings as if a threat could emerge from any bush. This was her village, the place where she was born, but she had left with her father when her parents divorced. So she had never had the chance to truly live there. Kara? Yeah, I think it's how it pronounces. Kara was 20 years old when she received a call from her aunt informing her that her mother had died suddenly of a heart attack. It was strange, because her mother had never had any heart problems, unless she had been hiding her condition from everyone. So Kara returned to her native village for her mother's funeral. That's where the nightmare began. October 25th was the day she arrived in town in the middle of autumn. She figured that was why the village was so dark, foggy and oppressive just the season. She went into her mother's house, which was now hers, and left her suitcases in the living room. Even there, the atmosphere was so heavy that she opened the windows to let in some fresh air. That's when she noticed some villagers passing by in the street. They all stopped to look at her as if one person. Their eyes were both curious and worried, scrutinizing her face. "Are you Matilda's daughter?" a voice called from the window, making her jump in with a small cry. It was an old woman with short grey hair, pale skin and thin, trembling hands. Yes, I'm Kara," she replied, regaining her composure as best as she could. The villagers exchanged glances and whispers before silence returned. The old woman cleared her throat. "What happened to your mother is truly tragic," she commented. "She never told me she had a heart problem," Kara sighed. The old woman gently stroked her arm, trying to comfort her. Strangely, her face seemed relieved, as if she had just received good news. "It happens sometimes. Do you intend to stay here long?" she asked. Kara hesitated, looking sadly around the living room. "No, I will leave after the funeral and sell this house," she announced. The old woman smiled. "Good. This village isn't very interesting for young people like you anyway." She then left without saying goodbye, followed by the other villagers who immediately resumed their activities. What a bizarre interaction, Kara thought to herself. Exhausted from the journey, she closed the window and sat down on the sofa to relax a little. Her mother's funeral was in 2 days, and she had other things on her mind than strange old villagers. They probably weren't used to see new faces around there. She went to her old room for a nap. Nothing had changed in the room. The same pink walls, the same furniture and decorations, as when she was a child. This was the first time she'd been back since her parents' divorce, and a wave of nostalgia washed over her. Her mother had always been the one to visit her in the city. She'd always forbidden her from setting a foot in this village. God knew why, although now she understood a little why. The place was rather creepy, not a good place for a family reunion. She flopped down on the bed. Even though it was now too small for her, she stared at the ceiling for a long moment before her gaze drifted to the half-open wall cupboard. Her curious instinct compelled her to take a look. She knew she probably wouldn't find anything interesting, but something urged her to check anyway. So she flung the cupboard door wide open and stood frozen at the sight before her. On the walls, in gigantic red letters, were two sentences. "Don't look at him, don't react." Kara's eyes were fixed on the red letters, wide in shock and confusion. She moved closer to the writing to confirm what she already knew. It was all written in blood. Had her mother written these words? Had she lost her mind? Or perhaps her death wasn't as accidental as it seemed. Her first reflex was to run and grab her phone. If she had just found evidence that a murder had been committed, she had to inform the police before her mother's body disappeared, forever underground. Before calling, she took a photo of the inscriptions just to be safe. She then contacted the police. She calmly explained the situation to an officer who seemed completely jaded. It was as if nothing could surprise him. He'd surely seen much worse throughout his career. The discussion was short and efficient, and Kara only had to wait a few minutes before a patrol car pulled in front of her house. Two officers got out in their uniforms. They didn't even have time to knock before Kara opened the door. "It's in the upstairs bedroom on the right," she said immediately. One of the officers went upstairs, while the other took out a notepad and pen to take a statement. "Are you sure it's blood?" he asked skeptically. "I'm not completely certain, but it looks very much like it, so I called you, just in case," she explained. The officer gave her a doubtful look. "Do you think this is a bad joke?" "What? No, I think it has something to do with my mother's death. I was told it was a heart attack, but I'm not sure anymore," she replied, frowning. The officer remained silent for a moment, as if faced with a difficult decision. "You suspect murder? Obviously, if my mother wrote these things, then it means she was afraid of someone. You can tell me it's just coincidence. My mother never had heart problems, and her lifestyle was impeccable," Kara argued. "Her death certificate clearly indicates a perfectly natural heart attack," he countered. His colleague returned, a flicker of concern in his eyes, but Kara ignored him. She was too busy trying to understand what had happened to her mother, and she was convinced it was her mother who had written the warning in the closet. She knew her handwriting. Seeing her concern, the official closed his notebook with a sigh. "We can show you the death certificate at the station if you want to see it for yourself," he offered. Kara nodded without hesitation. She had to see it for herself, written in black and white. So she followed the officer at the station, which wasn't far. It really was a small village. Once inside, they showed her mother's death certificate, which clearly indicated a heart attack. All the tests had been done, no trace of poison, no blows, everything pointed to a natural death. And yet, Kara couldn't bring herself to believe it. However, she couldn't dispute medical evidence. She slammed the file shut, her frustration mounting. She couldn't have explained it, but she sensed something was off about the story, something was missing. When she turned back to the officers, she recognized she couldn't help but ask, "What do you intend to do with the writing? It's suspicious after all." The two men looked at her in confusion. "What writing?" one of them asked. Kara was speechless. Did these two people had no memories? The writing in the closet, the ones that looked like blood, she reminded them. Seeing that neither of them reacted, she specified, "The ones I called you for?" "I didn't see any writing," the second officer stated. "Yet you literally went into the room to look at the closet. Did you forget to open your eyes? Because it's really quite obvious even to someone who isn't paying attention." "I looked into the closet, there was nothing there," he stated. Kara didn't know what to say anymore. She looked like a madwoman in front of these two officers who swore they hadn't found any writing. Yet she was convinced she had seen it. But there was no point arguing with people who categorically denied everything. So she stormed out of the police station without another word. Their statements had even begun to make her doubt what she had seen. She strode home and burst into the said room, yanking open the closet door. To her dismay, the walls were spotless. Not a single inscription, not a trace of blood. Doubt grew in her mind. Had she imagined it all? A memory suddenly resurfaced. She had taken a picture. In an almost desperate gesture, she pulled out her phone to search through her photo gallery. It was there. The photo of the graffiti was definitely there. She hadn't imagined it. The graffiti had existed, but it had disappeared or had been erased. Suspicion immediately fell on the officers. But why would they have done that? One thing was certain, Kara couldn't count on the police for help. And given the strange behavior of the villagers, she trusted no one. That night, she spent her time brooding and thinking, lying in the large bed that had once been her mother's. Sleep only found her late, once the exertion was unbearable. She woke up the next day groggy and still exhausted. She slowly left the room and looked out the window, rubbing her eyes. Suddenly, a moving shadow caught her attention. It looked human, but something was off. Its movements were erratic. The weather outside was so dark that Kara couldn't see the shadow's face, but she could feel it. It was staring. Her phone vibrated, and an interesting notification popping up. She glanced at the message for a split second. When her gaze returned to the window, the shadow was gone. Kara really needed a coffee. She grabbed her bag and went outside, surprised by the gray sky. She walked through the street looking for a cafe. After several minutes, she walked into the first one she saw, ready for her caffeine fix. As soon as she opened the door, all eyes were on her, much to her displeasure. She tried to ignore them and walked straight to the counter to order an espresso. You're Matilda's daughter, aren't you?" the barista asked. "I see news travel fast around here," she replied. He laughed. "You're the main topic of conversation," he joked. Kara sighed. Small villages were all the same, nothing ever happened, so once something did, people talked about it for weeks. "I'm sorry about the loss of your mother, by the way," he added. She nodded and took the coffee he offered her. "I just don't understand how this happened. I saw her not long ago and she seemed perfectly healthy, so how could she have died of a sudden heart attack out of nowhere?" she muttered, more to herself than to him. The barista's face fell. He leaned forward. "You don't know?" "Know what?" she asked, confused. His eyes darted around frantically as if he were about to do something wrong and was afraid of being caught. He opened his mouth, but before he could say a word, a stern voice stopped him. "There is no need to scare this young lady with your stories, Walter. She won't stay." It was the voice of a man in his 50s. He looked at the barista with an authoritative expression before giving Kara a polite smile. "What stories?" she asked, curious. "Just boring, pointless legend," he replied vaguely, brushing the question aside. Without answering, she took her coffee and started to leave when the barista Walter called out, "If you hear a strange cry, don't react." The old man scolded him, and Kara quickly left, wondering what was wrong with these people. Were they acting strangely on purpose, hoping she would run away as fast as possible? Were they this rude to strangers, always like this? Or were they hiding something? That day, she spent her time packing her mother's belongings to occupy her mind and try to find potential evidence that might be related to the missing inscriptions. It was painful enough going through old memories and family photos, but the idea of a potential unpunished murder was far worse. It was hard to accept that she could never see her mother again. Her death had been so sudden that she hadn't even had the chance to say goodbye. That evening, Kara ordered takeout and ate on the sofa while watching television. At that moment, the barista's word came back to her: "If you hear a strange cry, don't react." What did that mean? Why would she hear a scream? And more importantly, why shouldn't she react? If someone needed help, she would obviously respond. She shook her head to clear the thoughts, but the fact that those words reminded her of the graffiti was hard to ignore. Deep down, Kara couldn't wait to leave this village. It gave her the creeps. Unable to quiet her thoughts, she stayed up late watching television without really paying attention. She scrolled through her phone, ignoring the thousands of condolence messages she received relentlessly. Then she froze. Feeling watched, instinctively she went to the window and looked out toward the edge of the forest. Of course, it was dark, so she couldn't see much. "I'm enjoying the story, but gotta go do something real quick." No problem. Don't worry. You will just miss a little bit of the story, but that's fine. I will keep reading. Where was I again? Yeah. Of course, it was dark, so she couldn't see much. She felt someone watching her. Then she saw it, a figure between the trees, motionless. Kara turned on the porch light to illuminate the front of the house, allowing her to see more clearly. He was pale, thin. He was a pale, thin man. His greasy black hair was so long it reached his knees, obscuring part of his sickly face. His round, lifeless eyes stared directly at her. She couldn't move or speak. The sight was so strange, the man so inhuman, that she didn't know how to react. His mouth slowly opened, not like a normal person speaking though. It kept widening, distorting his face in an impossible, ghostly way. He didn't move, simply staring at her. Then, without a warning, a sharp piercing scream ripped through the air, a dry piercing howl that vibrated through the young woman's bones. She gasped and recoiled, a shiver running down her spine. That's when he got her, his new target. Kara quickly drew the curtains, her heart pounding. Silence returned instantly. Her eyes wandered to another window, and a terrified scream escaped her lips when she saw the man standing just behind the glass. He let out a high-pitched sound the moment their eyes met. She rushed to the window and closed the curtains once more. Then she did the same for every other window. Kara sat in the living room trying to understand what was happening. Was she going crazy? Was she hallucinating? The barista's words came back to her once more. If you hear a strange cry, don't react. He knew. He obviously knew and tried to warn her. Maybe this man was known around here, maybe the villagers were used to him, but she was convinced he was still outside, so she picked up her phone and called the police. After a few seconds, a calm voice answered. Kara explained the situation as clearly as possible, trying to keep her voice steady. When she finished, silence greeted her. "Hello," she repeated several times. The calm voice on the other end of the line became shaky. "You are Matilda's daughter, aren't you?" "What?" "Yes, but that has nothing to do with the situation," she retorted in exasperation. The person on the other end hung up abruptly. Kara stared at her phone in astonishment. The police's reaction was most peculiar and unexpected, but she was only half surprised after the graffiti incident. However, it only increased her suspicions toward the local police. What was going on in this village? She would think about it after she'd gotten rid of the stranger. It wasn't like her to let herself be intimidated by a shady character. Gathering her courage, she walked to the door and flung it open, ready for a confrontation. He was right there. His scream pierced her ears, sending a sharp pain through her skull. She quickly covered her ears and yelled, "Go away, leave me alone." He didn't obey. He remained motionless, shouting louder and louder until she rushed inside and slammed the door. Kara took a deep breath to calm herself, her heart pounding like a drum. The barista, she had to talk to the barista. He was the only one who tried to help her. She composed herself, opened the door, and faced the man who was shouting once more. But this time she didn't confront him. She ran past him without stopping. Despite her efforts, he appeared in her field of vision wherever she looked. His scream followed her, echoing in her ears. She kept running even though her breathing became ragged. When she finally reached the cafe, she knocked on the door, her ears still ringing from the shouts. The door was locked, but she saw light inside, so she didn't stop. Drawn by the noise, the barista approached, frowning. "Please let me in," she begged. After a moment of hesitation, he opened the door. She rushed inside, slammed the door shut, and closed the wooden blind. A sigh of relief escaped her as she slid down the doorway, breathless. He crouched beside her. "What happened? You told me not to react if I heard a scream." "I reacted," she admitted. His face paled. He looked up at the windows. "Is he following you?" "Yes, and I don't know what to do. He won't leave me alone. I called the police, but they hung up on me, and since you were the only one who warned me, I thought you might be able to help," she blurted out, panicked. He gave her a sorry look and sighed deeply before sitting down opposite to her. "There is nothing we can do, unfortunately. Now that he's targeted you, he won't let you go." The last glimmer of hope Kara held onto shattered. There has to be a way to make him leave," she begged. "I'm sorry." "But who is he?" "He's a well-known entity in the village. He roams the streets, waiting for someone to look at him. Once he catches someone's eyes, he screams. If you react to the sound in any way, he will follow you everywhere, screaming in your ears, frightening you, feeding on you until your heart stops." Kara froze. "He frightens people until they have a heart attack, like my mother," she whispered. It's quite possible she was one of his victims. Even outside the village, he will follow you, and even if you stay locked up at home, he will eventually appear in your mind, driving you crazy. I'm sorry, I can't help you anymore." Completely desperate, she stood up, fighting back tears. "Couldn't even some kind of shamanic ritual help me? If there is one, I don't know it." "Thank you for trying to warn me," she finally said, sounding dejected. She left the cafe and went home. The man was still following her, his high-pitched shriek still piercing her ears. She covered her ears, trying to muffle the sound, trying to ignore him, but he was still there, among the crowd, staring at her with his disgustingly open mouth. She went into her house and curled up on the sofa, savoring the brief silence. Then she broke down, her body trembling as the tears floated freely. Not only was she being followed by a deadly entity, but she had discovered that her mother had died from the same thing and that she would likely soon suffer the same fate. And there was no escape. She tried to relax, to escape her thoughts. For a moment, Kara drew herself a hot bath and sank into it with a sigh of relief, feeling her body calm as she closed her eyes. After a while, she got out and wrapped herself in a towel, looking at her reflection. He appeared. In the mirror behind her, his scream still echoed. Startled by the apparition, she cried out and spun around, her breath rippling. He wasn't really there. When she looked in the mirror again, he was gone, leaving her heart in ruins. So she couldn't rest, not even for a minute. The young woman spent the rest of the night curled up on her bed, avoiding every window and mirror, trying to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the man's face appeared in her mind, along with the memory of that horrible sound. The next day, exhausted, she forced herself to get up and prepare for her mother's funeral. With a sigh, she went outside and faced the man again, trying to ignore him. She walked into the cemetery where she watched her mother being buried, tears streaming down her face from both grief and exhaustion. If death had been caused by some entity, then it made sense that nothing strange had been found during the autopsy. Kara couldn't take it anymore. She left before the ceremony was over, the villagers not even daring to look at her. They all avoided her with guilty expressions. They already knew. She went home, her fear slowly turning into anger. The thing had killed her mother and now it wanted to kill her too. She wasn't going to let it do that without a fight. Once she reached the porch, she glared at the entity. She went inside, grabbed the knife, and ran back out. In a fit of rage, she tried to stab the man, but the blade sank into his skin as if it were a straw man. He didn't even flinch, he just screamed louder. Realizing it was pointless, she let out a frustrated snarl and stormed back inside. She threw a glass against the wall, furious at her helplessness. The young woman paced the house, desperately trying to find a way to escape, but she found nothing. Entities weren't supposed to be real, they were just legends. She reached for her phone to search online, but as soon as she looked at the screen, the image of the ghostly man appeared with the same horrifying sound. She screamed and threw the phone down. She turned on the television to distract herself, but once again, the entity face filled the screen. Its screams echoed through the room. Kara switched it off immediately and moaned in despair, burying her face in the pillows. There was no escape. So what now? Was she supposed to just wait for it to end? Was there no cure? If her mother had confronted the entity, perhaps she had left something behind, a clue to help others. Perhaps she had left a trace that Kara hadn't found the first time she'd searched. She ran to her mother's old room. She had to find something against the screaming man and fast. By mistake, her eyes drifted to a window where the screaming man stood, his hand on the glass. His eyes fixed on her hungrily. She quickly closed the curtains to buy herself some time. No one could say how long it would take for him to stop her heart. When she heard the entity scraping the glass with its claws, she knew she didn't have much time left. She rushed to her mother's things. She opened the door to her dressing room and froze. On the wall, written in huge red letters, was the message, "Don't look at him, don't react." The same warning as in the child room. The same handwriting. Dozens of papers were scattered on the floor. She crouched down. Most were frantic sketches of the screaming man. Others repeated, "Don't react." Others said, "I'm sorry," in shaky handwriting. She fell backward, the truth hitting her like a punch. Her mother hadn't found any clue about how to escape the screaming man or even how to buy any time. There wasn't even a glimmer of a solution, nothing. But Kara wouldn't let him take her. She wasn't ready to give him that satisfaction. If her life was to end tonight, it would be on her own terms, not those of some demonic entity that wanted her heart. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, rising with renewed determination. Her hands trembled, but she refused to let fear stop her. She stepped past the mirror and saw the man's reflection screaming at her with furious eyes. He knew what she was thinking, and he wasn't happy. She smiled, grabbed a chair, and dragged it into the middle of the room. She tore a sheet and she tore the sheets and tied them together into a tight rope, which she hung from a beam. From this position, she faced directly into the large window, having removed the curtains so she could look straight into the man's eyes. His scream grew louder and more frustrated as she climbed into the chair and grasped the rope. The entity hands pressed against the glass, cracks spreading like cobwebs. Kara placed the rope around her neck, still staring at the furious entity. When the window shattered into a million pieces, glass flew everywhere. She felt several cuts on her skin, but she didn't care. The entity entered the room, its hand reaching for the young woman's heart. "You won't get me," she warned before he could touch her. The chair tipped over with a thud and echoed throughout the house, dropping the body it had supported. The sudden fall snapped the neck instantly. Silence fell. The lifeless body hung slightly, gently swaying in the breeze from the shattered window. Her hair drifted like an ethereal curtain. The entity was gone without having obtained the life it craved. A partial victory in itself, but one that had cost far more than it should have. The screaming man would have to search for a new victim. He was still hungry. He always wanted more. And this is the end. I hope you liked it and it wasn't like boring to hear or something.